The morning was so quiet that I could clearly hear my own heartbeat. Wild buffalo were not prey we usually pursued, but the first tracks already suggested this would be a different hunt. Sunlight filtered through the trees, revealing large hoof prints on the dry ground. The soil was still soft, showing that the animal had passed through not long ago. The group understood the situation without speaking. A wild buffalo nearby was both a rare opportunity and the biggest challenge of the day. We continued moving slowly and steadily, walking in a line and keeping enough distance to avoid making noise. The wind blew from the front, carrying the scent of grass and soil, helping conceal our presence. Along the way, we paid attention to every sign: flattened grass, broken branches, and deep marks in ground. The animal's pace did not seem like that of a healthy buffalo, making us even more cautious, because unusual animals are often the most unpredictable. The tracks led us to an area of heavily disturbed ground, where overlapping footprints showed the animal had remained there for quite some time. I signaled for everyone to stop and observe. A strange feeling suddenly appeared. The area was far too quiet. There were no birds and none of the usual sounds from the brush. The air felt heavy, and all my senses focused on the slightest movement ahead. I stepped slightly to one side and raised my bow as the animal came into view. There was no time left to think. Only instinct, experience, and concentration remained. I drew the string and released the arrow in a single motion. The impact echoed through the silence. The buffalo staggered, took a few more steps, and stopped. Time seemed to freeze. The sound of heavy footsteps disappeared, leaving only slow, fading breaths. Even after the animal stopped moving, we did not rush forward. Everyone remained in position, watching carefully. In moments like this, overconfidence can become a serious mistake. Only when I was completely certain did I move closer. The buffalo lay motionless in the clearing, while a thin layer of dust still drifted in the air. I stood there for a few seconds, feeling my heartbeat settle. The hunt ended faster than expected, but the tension remained. There were no cheers or celebrations. For us, this was not simply the result of a hunt, but a reminder of how unpredictable nature can be. Only minutes earlier, everything had seemed normal, yet the situation changed in an instant. Once we confirmed the area was safe, the group began preparing for the next task. A simple nod was enough for everyone to understand what needed to be done. Time was important. We quickly organized ourselves and worked in our usual rhythm. while helping my companions. I continued watching surroundings, occasionally stopping to listen to the wind or glance toward distant bushes. In the wild, vigilance does not end when the hunt is over. Sunlight filtered through the trees and illuminated the work area. Sweat began to form, but no one stopped. Everyone remained focused on completing their task as efficiently as possible. After some time, everything was finished. The items needed for the return journey were carefully organized. Before leaving, I looked back at the area one last time. The signs of the hunt remained, but the tension had already given way to the calmness of nature. We returned to camp with steady steps. No one spoke much, but everyone understood that this had been a special day, not because it was easy, but because we stayed calm when it mattered most. When we returned to camp, the gentle sunlight painted the familiar trees in shades of gold. People quickly noticed that we had come back earlier than expected and understood that today's hunt had been different. After everything was arranged, the result was shared with everyone in a traditional way, maintaining a bond that had lasted for generations. As night fell, I looked up at the sky and remembered the moment I faced a wild buffalo. The experience was a reminder that in nature, a single unexpected moment can change everything. If you enjoyed this journey, leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join us on future adventures.
The coastline stretched out ahead, flat and so still that it was almost impossible to detect any movement. To them, an area that was too quiet usually meant something was being hidden. They did not move straight toward the water. No rushing, no unnecessary motion. The wind skimmed across the surface, creating steady ripples. But occasionally, a very small movement appeared, quick, fleeting, then gone. Not enough for most people to notice, but for them, it was a signal. The pace shifted instantly, faster, more decisive, yet still controlled. The distance closed within seconds. The approach was complete. The water lost its stillness. Ripples spread outward, disturbing the surface briefly before settling again. Within moments, everything returned to how it was: calm water, an almost unchanged shoreline. Without witnessing the entire sequence, it would be difficult to realize what had just happened. For crocodiles, this hunting method does not rely on speed or strength, but on patience and extremely precise observation. They can remain motionless for long periods, almost blending into the water, simply waiting for the right moment. Their eyes stay level with the surface, tracking even the smallest movements without being detected. When the moment arrives, they act in an instant, quick, clean, and leaving almost no trace. This level of control and perfect timing allows them to confront one of the most unpredictable targets in the natural environment. And sometimes, just a small mistake is enough to cause the entire plan to collapse. If you find this moment intense, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to follow more. Once they reach dry land, they begin processing right on the spot. There is no complicated preparation, everything is done directly and efficiently. Usable parts are separated quickly, while unnecessary portions are removed without hesitation. Every movement is precise and familiar. Clearly, this is not their first time doing it. No one needs to give instructions, yet everyone understands their role. The coordination happens naturally, forming a smooth and efficient process. After completing the basic preparation, they begin preparing the meal right there. A few dry branches are gathered and arranged into a small pile. The fire is started quickly, simple, yet steady enough to maintain heat. Once the fire stabilizes, the food is placed near the heat source. There are no tools, no complex techniques, just placing it directly over the fire or near the hot coals, adjusting the distance as needed. Everything is controlled through observation. The color changes, the surface transforms, and the aroma spreads into the air. When the heat weakens, they add more wood. There are no measurements, only experience guiding each action. When the food reaches the right level of doneness, they begin taking it off naturally, without any signal or fixed order. Whoever is closest takes first, then shares with those around them. The food does not stay in one place but moves continuously from hand to hand, creating a very natural rhythm. Portions are often broken into smaller pieces before eating, and almost always, a part is passed to someone else. No invitations, no requests, just a habit formed over time. For them, this is not a special moment that needs to be separated or emphasized. It is simply a familiar part of their way of life, happening at the right time, fully utilized, and ending as naturally as it began. When the water returns to its calm state, it seems as if nothing is left behind. But for the Hadzabe people, it represents a complete journey, from observation to action, and finally to a meal prepared on the spot. If you want to follow more stories like this, from crocodile hunting to encounters with even more dangerous animals, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.
In the dry forests near Lake Eyasi in Tanzania, the Hadzabe tribe continues to live a way of life that has remained almost unchanged for thousands of years. While the modern world grows more dependent on technology, electricity, and crowded cities, the Hadzabe still survive through hunting and gathering, just like their prehistoric ancestors. No farmland, no livestock, no stored food. For them, every single day begins with a new hunt. As the first light of sunrise slowly appeared over the horizon, several men had already been awake for hours. They sat quietly around a small fire, checking their bows and carefully inspecting arrows coated with poison made from desert tree sap. Once everything was ready, the hunting group left the camp. They moved quickly, yet made almost no sound at all. One man suddenly stopped beside a patch of soft ground beneath a low thorn bush. He crouched down and gently touched a fresh hoof print with his fingers. It was the sign of a large wild boar that had passed through not long ago. To the Hadzabe, wild boars are both dangerous and valuable prey. They are powerful, aggressive, and capable of attacking without warning. But if the hunt succeeds, the amount of meat can feed the entire community for days. From that moment on, the hunt became far more intense. The group followed the tracks for nearly an hour. Then, without warning, a loud crash erupted ahead of them. A massive male wild boar exploded out of the brush, its body covered in mud as it charged forward at incredible speed, throwing sand and dust behind it. Almost instantly, 2 hunting dogs rushed in to cut off its path. One hunter raised his bow, and an arrow shot through the air before striking the animal. But the hunt was far from over. The boar continued running for a long distance, forcing the entire group to chase after it. Slowly, the poison on the arrowhead began taking effect. The animal's movements weakened until it finally collapsed in an open clearing. The work began immediately. Using small blades, the hunters processed the animal with remarkable speed and precision. Large portions of meat were cut and prepared to carry back to camp, while the organs were kept aside for food later that same day. By the time the sun stood high overhead, the hunters finally began making their way back. Heavy slabs of meat were tied together with leather straps and carried across their shoulders. But even on the journey home, the hunt was not truly over yet. Suddenly, the group stopped and looked up into the trees ahead. A slight movement appeared among the high branches. A baboon was slowly climbing across a large tree in search of ripe fruit. The hunters immediately froze. One man quietly stepped forward, pulled back his bowstring, and released an arrow that sliced through the air in an instant. The baboon jerked violently before falling from the tree. The others rushed forward to secure the animal. For the Hadzabe, this was more than just extra meat. Baboons are considered a rich source of energy and often become an unexpected reward after a long day of hunting. When they returned to camp, the meat was quickly divided into smaller portions and shared among the community. Several large cuts were placed directly over the fire. Fat from the wild boar dripped onto the glowing coals, filling the camp with the smell of roasted meat. Other pieces were hung from tree branches to smoke and preserve them for later. Soon, laughter echoed throughout the camp as the men rested after spending the entire day moving through the brutal heat. There were no modern tools, no machines, no electricity. Only fire, food, and the quiet sense of peace that came after a successful day of survival. What makes the Hadzabe truly remarkable is not just their hunting skill, but the way they continue to live alongside nature itself. While the modern world keeps moving faster every year, the life of the Hadzabe still follows that same ancient rhythm, slow, harsh, yet deeply connected. And perhaps that is what makes so many people wonder whether modern humanity has truly moved forward, or if we have simply drifted farther away from the simplest parts of life. If you want to explore more stories of primitive survival like this one, don't forget to follow and leave your thoughts below.
结束了，我就准备在这里。
哎，拜拜。
We arrived in the land of the Hadzabe people on a quiet morning. It was not the emptiness of silence, but the feeling of a place that has existed in the same rhythm for hundreds of thousands of years. Their small shelters rested humbly beneath scattered trees. No walls, no doors, only thin branches bent into dome-like frames, covered with dry grass and tied together with forest vines. Everything looked simple, yet every detail had been shaped through generations of observing the land, the trees, and the weather. The Hads do not build homes to claim ownership. They build shelters to rest, live in harmony with nature, and move on when the land needs time to recover. The hunt did not begin with words, but with the smallest movements. Their prey was incredibly diverse. They hunted whatever animals crossed their path, even the smallest ones. For the Hads, hunting is not about achieving a great victory. It is a way of maintaining the connection between people and the forest. We watched as they stopped to inspect each arrow carefully. The arrow tips were coated with poison made from local plants, toxins powerful enough to bring down massive animals, such as African buffalo. The men moved forward quietly with their hunting dogs beside them. For the Hads, dogs are not tools. They are companions, part of the hunting group itself. The group moved quickly while making almost no sound, as if they had memorized every trail and every piece of terrain in the area. At times, when they reached rocky outcrops overlooking the open wilderness, they climbed up, stood still, and scanned the forest with complete focus. They continued moving forward, searching for more prey to sustain the tribe, until the hunt finally brought them face to face with an animal of entirely different weight and significance. No one said much, but the atmosphere shifted the moment the animal appeared. They did not rush in immediately. Instead, they waited patiently, silently studying the surroundings and reading every movement of the terrain from a distance. When the bows were finally drawn, it was no longer the action of a single individual, but a decision tied to the survival of the entire community. The hunt only ended once they were certain the animal was no longer suffering. Everyone understood that one life had ended so that many others could continue. When the animals were brought back to camp, the atmosphere changed once again. The women naturally stepped into the preparation process without needing any instructions. No one gave orders and no one assigned roles.
fire was started using the most primitive methods imaginable. Every step unfolded in the middle of the open wilderness, creating a scene that has almost disappeared from the modern world. The meat was placed over the fire immediately. Children sat nearby in silence, watching, waiting, and learning. They were never pushed away, because among the Hads, becoming part of the community begins at a very young age. There are no dining tables and no assigned seats. The meat was shared equally among everyone. Adults ate, children ate, and even the hunting dogs received their share. In the Had's community, selfishness seems to have no place. Just like this meal, no one eats alone, and no one stores food away for tomorrow to... In that moment, we realized this meal was far more than the result of a hunt. It was the meeting point of an entire way of life. From temporary shelters deep in the forest, to cooperation during the hunt, to sharing without rules or authority. Everything was connected in a strong and enduring circle of survival. If this meal made you stop and reflect for a moment, take a second to hit the like button, not just for the video, but for the values that are slowly disappearing from the modern world. And if you want to continue joining us on journeys where people still live in harmony with nature, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss the next episode.
On the vast African savanna, where the wind sweeps across layers of dry grass like invisible waves, a Hadza hunter steps into a wild boar hunt using skills passed down through generations. Here, every decision affects not only the individual but is also tied to the meals of the entire community. Yet the hunt does not begin with tracking the prey, it begins with a quiet, almost invisible preparation. Before leaving their living area, the hunters take time to inspect each bow and every arrow that has accompanied them over the years. There are no reminders, no rigid procedures, everything unfolds as naturally as breathing. They pick up an arrow, feel its weight and balance, then set it down if it does not feel right. The bowstring is adjusted with precision, neither too tight to lose control nor too loose to reduce force. These slow, deliberate actions are not just about preparing tools, but also about steadying the mind before stepping into a vast and unpredictable environment. As the group begins to move, the atmosphere remains quiet. No one speaks much, and no one rushes. Their steps are steady, and the distance between each person is naturally maintained. Along the way, their eyes constantly scan the surroundings, the direction of the wind, the position of the sun, the moisture of the soil, and even the smallest signs on the grass. The savanna is never predictable, and only those who understand it can survive in the long term. At this stage, they are not yet searching for wild boars. What matters more is reading the day, reading the terrain, the weather, the rhythm of nature. If an opportunity appears, they are ready to take it, even if it is only a small animal. For the Hadza, an unsuccessful hunt is not a failure, but an inevitable part of life, where patience and understanding are valued more than results. The first signs of wild boars begin to appear. The ground is disturbed, familiar trails emerge, grass is pressed flat against the earth, all like invisible lines of text that only the experienced can read. Yet they do not rush forward. The group pauses, observes carefully, and determines direction and distance. This is where experience becomes the deciding factor, distinguishing fresh tracks from old traces. Each person begins to spread out, taking positions suited to the open terrain. No commands are given, no assignments are needed, everyone knows where to stand and what to do. Patience becomes the most important weapon. Wild boars are highly sensitive and can change direction at any moment. Instead of hastily closing the distance, they wait for the right moment to maintain their advantage.
The different light, not fear, but rage. Wasn't just a tank charging straight ahead.
Throughout the hunt, all senses are fully engaged. The wind direction is constantly checked to avoid revealing their scent. The slightest movements of bushes, fleeting sounds, or subtle environmental changes are never overlooked. This is not merely a chase, but a synchronization with nature, where humans do not dominate, but adapt and move alongside it. When the hunt ends, what remains is not the noise of victory, but a sense of stillness. The group returns with slow, steady steps, as if they have simply completed a familiar part of everyday life. On the savannah, there are no cheers, no grand celebrations, only calmness and understanding. The result of the hunt quickly becomes a shared asset of the entire community. No one keeps anything for themselves. There is no distinction between those who participated and those who stayed behind. For them, a hunt is only truly complete when it is shared. The tasks that follow unfold naturally, no assignments, no reminders, because everyone is already familiar with their role. When everyone gathers, the atmosphere becomes warmer. Stories do not need to be told in words. Through glances, smiles, or a few gentle gestures, everyone understands. What matters is not the details, but the feeling of being together after a long day. The shared meal is not only to satisfy hunger. It is a bond, a way to share time, effort, and results. In these simple moments, the community is strengthened, day by day, meal by meal, in a natural and enduring way. For the Hadza, hunting is not just about survival. It is a way of preserving an ancient way of life, where humans, nature, and community exist side by side. In a constantly changing modern world, such hunts still continue, quietly yet persistently, like the very breath of the savannah. And perhaps, the greatest value does not lie in the prey, but in the journey, where every step and every decision helps preserve a heritage that has endured through generations.
One man stepped forward.
The afternoon on the dry grasslands east of Lake Icy was hot and nearly windless. Sunlight slanted through the low bushes, casting a reddish glow across the ground and the dry grass. For the Hadzabe people, this was a time to search for water. A group of Hadzabe hunters left camp and followed narrow trails across the savannah. They moved quietly through thorny shrubs and scattered acacia trees. At first glance, the landscape seemed lifeless, but the Hadzabe knew how to recognize the smallest signs nature left behind. The trail led them into a denser patch of vegetation. Suddenly, the men stopped. Beneath the dry grass lay a grayish-brown mass coiled into thick loops. Its scales shimmered in the afternoon sunlight. It was a giant African rock python. The snake remained almost motionless, its body curled like a broken branch among the grass. The Hadzabe hunters immediately spread out in a semicircle. No words were spoken, only quick glances and subtle hand signals. An arrow was placed on the bowstring. Its tip had been coated with poison extracted from the Adenium obesum plant, a desert species known for weakening prey over time. Within minutes, the python began to lose strength. The hunt ended quickly, and the valuable meat would become food for the entire group. In the city, snacks are often just a form of entertainment. Out here, honey is a valuable source of energy. A hunting trip can last for hours, sometimes an entire day, so the Hadzabe rely on what nature provides. They lit a small smoky fire from dry branches to drive the bees away, then used a knife to cut a section of the honeycomb. Honey slowly dripped into their hands. There was no ceremony and no announcement. They simply broke off pieces of honeycomb and passed them around as naturally as if it were an everyday meal. I was handed a piece as well. The honey was rich and sweet, while the wax had a pleasantly chewy texture. No one took more than anyone else, and no one saved a portion for later. Once they finished eating, the group continued on their way as if it were just another ordinary part of daily life. Their day does not begin with schedules or urgent tasks. For the Hadza, every meal begins with a hunt. From the signs left on the ground, the hunters knew their next target was a group of wild pigs. One hunter moved ahead, while the others spread out to the sides. No words were exchanged, only brief hand signals and the kind of coordination built through years of experience. Suddenly, the pigs burst from the brush. An arrow flew through the air. One animal ran a short distance before collapsing. The hunter quickly approached, and smiles spread across the group. It was a simple but genuine moment of joy. In this world, every successful hunt means a full meal for the entire camp. They did not take the animal back to camp right away. The meal took place where the hunt ended. A small fire was built from dry branches. There were no elaborate cooking tools. Pieces of meat were roasted directly over the coals. As the aroma filled the air, one man divided the meat among the group. They ate with their hands, occasionally laughing as drops of fat fell onto hot coals with soft sizzling sound. As the sun set behind the acacia trees, the huts in the camp began to glow in the light of small fires. Children ran around nearby. The adults shared the remaining meat from the wild pig and the python. There were no modern conveniences, only a sky filled with stars overhead. Beside the fire, one hunter quietly sharpened his arrows for the next day. Living with the Hadza, I realized that their community places the group above the individual. Survival skills are passed down through generations through real experience. Hunting is not only about finding food, it also strengthens the bonds between members of the community. There is no electricity, no internet, and no great accumulation of wealth, yet they possess strong cooperation and a deep spirit of sharing. When I left the camp, I still remember the circle of simple huts. It was there that I came to understand that wealth is not measured only by material possessions, but also by how much people depend on one another to survive.
On the vast savanna near Lake Eyasi in Tanzania, there is a predator that even the most experienced hunters of the Hadzabe people approach with special caution. It does not move in packs like hyenas, nor does it leave obvious signs like buffalo or antelope. Most of the time, it is nearly invisible within the natural landscape. It is the leopard, a solitary predator, agile and renowned for its extraordinary ability to remain hidden. Today, the Hadzabe hunters are preparing for a special journey, tracking a leopard that has been spotted several times around their familiar hunting grounds. As the sun rises above the horizon, the group of hunters leaves the camp in silence. Their bows are carefully inspected, and their arrows are securely fastened in quivers on their backs. Few words are spoken. For the Hadzabe, a successful hunt often begins with observation rather than action. They move along narrow trails winding through thorny bushes, carefully searching for signs that most people would overlook. A scratch on a tree trunk, a few blades of flattened grass, or faint tracks in soft soil can all become important clues. It does not take long for them to discover the first sign. On a patch of damp ground left by the light rain the previous night, several large, brown tracks stand out clearly. The hunters quickly recognize that they do not belong to a hyena or a wild dog. The spacing between the footprints suggests that the animal was moving slowly and confidently. That usually happens only when a leopard feels completely in control of its territory. The hunting party immediately adjusts its formation, maintaining enough distance to observe while avoiding unnecessary noise. As they venture deeper into an area filled with acacia trees, the signs become increasingly frequent. A few scattered feathers lie beneath a tree. Farther ahead are the remains of a small antelope that has been dragged into the shade. To the Hadzabe, this indicates that the leopard may still be very close. No one increases their pace. Instead, they move even more slowly. In the world of the leopard, haste is often the greatest mistake. As they approach a large cluster of trees, the entire group suddenly stops. One of the hunters points upward. Several meters above the ground, the remains of a prey animal are lodged among the branches. The Hadzabe know this behavior well. Leopards often drag their kills into trees to protect them from scavengers such as hyenas and wild dogs. If the food is still there is a good chance the leopard will return. Rather than approaching directly, the hunters choose a favorable observation point.
They shoot an animal, they immediately run after it.
They patiently watch the surrounding area, read the direction of the wind, and listen carefully to every sound coming from the treetops. Patience has always been an essential part of Hadzabe hunting culture. They understand that nature often rewards those who know how to wait for the right moment. A slight movement in the distance quickly captures the attention of the entire group. Among the shifting patches of sunlight and shadow, a golden body marked with distinctive black spots appears and disappears within seconds. The leopard is quietly observing the uninvited visitors. The atmosphere immediately becomes tense. The hunters remain exactly where they are, avoiding any sudden movements. They know that they are facing one of the most quick-reacting animals on the savanna. After a brief period of observation, the leopard decides to leave the area. It glides through the nearby bushes almost without making a sound, and then disappears into the sparse woodland in the distance. The hunters do not pursue it. For the Hadzabe, the goal is not always to capture an animal. Sometimes understanding its behavior, territory, and methods of survival is far more valuable. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the hunters begin their return to camp. Along the way, they continue gathering wild fruits and searching for honey from small beehives hidden inside hollow trees. These activities unfold naturally as part of everyday life. Upon returning, everyone quickly gathers around the fire, prepares food, and shares what was collected during the journey. The afternoon passes peacefully. Some people repair their bows and arrows, while others tell the children about the encounter with the leopard in the forest. On the land that has sustained them for thousands of years, the Hadzabe continue to preserve their ancient traditions. And with every footprint and every journey across the savanna, they add another chapter to the remarkable story of survival that defines their people.
On the savanna, not every hunt begins with the search for prey. There are days when the first thing humans must face is the presence of another predator. The morning unfolds slowly. The early sunlight is not yet harsh, just enough to highlight the smallest details on the dry ground. The Hadzabe group leaves the camp in a familiar rhythm, each carrying a bow and the experience accumulated from years of living with this land. The hunt always begins with walking and observing. They move slowly, never spreading too far apart, every step intentional. They read the ground, notice flattened grass, and listen to faint sounds in the distance. At times, the group pauses at a faint trace, then quietly moves on. For the Hadzabe, understanding does not lie in words but in perception. The prey may be ahead, but it is never the only thing they focus on. They listen to the direction of the wind, watch birds suddenly change course. These small signals are enough to remind them that they are not the only ones hunting on this land. The breeding season is approaching, and the pace of the hunt slows down. At times, they deliberately change direction even when the tracks are still clear. This is not hesitation, but a survival instinct shaped over generations. On this land, the presence of a lion does not need to be seen to be felt. It shows in how they move, in the distance they keep from one another, and in knowing when to advance and when to wait. The hunt continues, but from this point on, every decision must be more precise. If you can feel the slow rhythm and the quiet tension of this hunt, don't forget to hit the like button. The silence lingers longer than usual. The scent in the air is still there, but this time it is no longer vague. Ahead, the lion gradually comes into clear view. Its movements are slow and heavy, as if the ground itself is holding it back. The hads do not rush forward. They stand still long enough to observe the entire space, the distance, the wind direction, and the exhaustion visible in the animal's every movement. This is not a moment of impulse, but the result of countless observations, when all options to avoid the encounter no longer seem possible. One person steps forward half a step. The bow is raised steadily, fully controlled. There is no shouting, no haste. The others remain in place, forming a silent line where every movement carries meaning. In that moment, the savannah seems to hold its breath. The decision is made not to prove strength, but to end a threat that has lasted too long. The lion stops, then slowly lowers itself, as if accepting its own limits within the harsh cycle of nature. When the stillness returns, everything unfolds quickly, without excess. The hads lower their bows and step back, returning the space to the savannah. For them, bringing down the lion is not a victory, but a necessary ending, one that ensures the safety of the camp and allows life to continue. The air softens, but there is no excitement, because they understand that on this land, every ending carries a lasting responsibility. Was this choice inevitable, a matter of survival, or a difficult boundary to accept? Share your thoughts in the comments.
Which means friend.
As the sunset fades over the savannah, the atmosphere in the Hadzabe camp begins to change. The steps on the way back grow lighter, and conversations become more lively. The tension of the day disappears. Food is prepared in a warm, welcoming mood. Each portion is passed from hand to hand, no one left behind. This meal is not just to fill empty stomachs, but a clear sign that life continues in the best way possible. As everyone begins to eat, conversations flow without pause. Laughter rises naturally, as if the entire camp has finally released what remained after a long, tense day.